In today's video, we are going to talk about different ways of binding off on a knitting machine. I'm going to work on my bulky Brother 260 knitting machine, but the technique is the same in most knitting machines. The first method I want to show you is the knitted bind off. Basically, you hand knit one row and bind off stitch by stitch. You can use the one prong transferring tool, and usually I like to work from the right side to the left. And you can take the yarn off the carriage so you have more control. You can knit it by your hand one by one. Put the transferring tool in the hook, pull it out, place the yarn in the hook, knit one stitch. Now one stitch is hand knitted, and you transfer this stitch to the next needle and place on the hook, push out the needle, put the yarn inside the hook, and then push it back. Now the second stitch is knitted, and then transfer the stitch to the next needle and place the yarn in the hook again, and we just keep going. Move to the next needle. And just keep going the same. Transfer to the last stitch, and then that's it. We can cut off this one and take it off the machine and just go through like that. That's how the bind off look like. This is the front side. This is the back side. There's a little bit hole in between each stitches. The second method of bind off is the loop through loop bind off. When you are ready to bind off, you knit one row very loosely, maybe several tension higher, or you can knit it by hand with the yarn fitted very loosely. I have my tension around 7, so I'm going to dial it all the way to the top to the 10 and knit across. Now we have one row that's loose. Start with your latch tool, and you can bring out the needle all the way out to make it easier. Bring out the knitting. We start from right side. Use the latch tool to insert it into the first loop, the first stitch, and bring it all the way out, or you can just push the needle back. Now the loop is in your latch, and then just go to the second loop. And make sure the first loop is below the latch and the second loop is inside the latch. When you pull the needle out, it creates a chain stitch, and we'll do the same for the third needle. Put the latch in, make sure the first loop is below the latch, and we close the latch can pull the second one out, and we keep going. Put the latch in, make sure the first one is below. Can pull this out. Now you can see a chain stitch forming at the edge. Now the last stitch is the same. It's the last one. And then we can cut this yarn and just pull it through. We'll do that here. And pull the yarn through. Now we'll finish this one. This is the front side. It's very beautiful, very sturdy chain stitch. This is the back side. But you can see it's not very stretchy. The third bind off method is a sewing bind off. You will need a needle like this or any blunt needle with a big eye at the end. You don't really need a double eye for sewing bind off. To begin, we will have to cut the yarn the length of at least 3 to 4 times of this size. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we can thread the needle, and it's easier to push out all the needles. So you can see better when you are working on the sewing. So the trick of this bind off is you need to have 2 stitch forward and 1 stitch back. And now we will start with the first stitch on the right. We go from the front in, tighten up the first stitch, and from the back side we have 2 stitch to the left, so it will be the third stitch on the needle. And coming out to the front, 2 stitch forward, and now 1 stitch back. Now we go to the second needle, go in, pull to the back, and we'll do the same thing. 2 stitch left, make sure you don't get caught anywhere. 2 stitch forward, 1 stitch back. After you're done with that stitch, you can just take it out of the machine, take it out of the needle, or you can do that at the end after you finish all the sewing. This one is done, I'll take it out. Now, 2 stitch forward, 1 stitch back. Now this stitch is done, you take it out. 2 stitch to the left. One stitch back. Now we are at the last 3 stitches. We do the same, 2 stitch forward, one stitch back, take this one out, and we don't have another one to go 2 stitch forward, but we can do 1 stitch forward, one stitch back, you can take this one off the needle, and at the end it's better to go through the last stitch one more time, push it all the way to the back. It kind of secures the end better, and that's it. You take it off the needle. That's what it looks like in the front. That's what it looks like in the back. You can see it matches my E-rod cast on perfectly, and it's still stretchy. The next bind off is a waist yarn bind off. It's very simple. Basically, you cut the yarn and change to a different color. Usually it's a contrasting color yarn, and you need a few rows. After you change to a contrasting color yarn, you need a few rows. I would say at least 5 to 7 rows, so it doesn't unravel when you are working on it. After you think you have enough rows, you can cut the yarn. And just take the knitting off the machine. That's what it looks like. This is the back side. This is the front side. And on the top of the waist yarn, I didn't bind off because it's just temporary. And the next we have to finish with the regular hand knitting needle. We can pick up the stitches here because you can see very clearly it's a different color. We pick up all the loops with a knitting needle. I have 15 stitches on the machine, so make sure I pick up 15 stitches. And now you can bind off by hand knitting with any type of binding off method you like. And you can take off the waist yarn. You can take off the waist yarn now, or you can do it later. I think I'm just going to take it off for now. Just unravel the waist yarn. Okay, I take off the waist yarn. Now you just bind off like the regular knitting. I can show you the standard bind off. I'm going to attach the different yarn so you can see better. And I'm going to work from the right side. Just like the standard knitting. I'm going to knit 1 stitch. We attach the yarn first and just knit the first stitch. Now I notice my right leg is not in the front. Typically when you do the stockinette stitch, the right leg is always in the front. So you can redo it this way or you can knit through the back. I'm just going to knit through the back loop. That will return the right leg to the front. And just bring the first stitch through to the left side. Now one stitch is bound off. Pull tight a little bit, and we do the second stitch. I'm just going to knit through the back loop because the right leg is in the back. You will twist the stitch a little bit here. Okay, this is the last stitch. I think it's loose here. Last stitch. That's it. Pull it through. Now that's a finished bind off by hand with waste yarn. This is the back side. So that's the 4 different type of bind off. The first one is a knitted bind off. I knitted one by one, stitch by stitch, and that's what it looks like. That's the back side. The second one is a loop through loop. You have to make sure the last row is knitted very loosely or it gets too tight. The third one is a sewing bind off. We have it 2 stitch forward and 1 stitch backward. It matches the Europe cast on perfectly. The last one, we use the waste yarn of the contrasting color and take it off machine. We put the hand knitting needle and bind off by hand. Just the standard hand knitting bind off, or you can bind off any way you want by hand. I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching.